Hi Bill, how you doing?
I'm fine. How are you today?
Pretty good.
Are you enjoying the outdoors?
I think so.
Welcome to my version of outdoor model railroading.
Of course, everybody in the audience is aware of your Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad that you've been working on for the last, 25 years, something like that?
The layout is now in its 29th year.
29th year, yeah.
I couldn't believe that when we figured it out, and I guess that means I'm getting old.
Well, you've been working on that layout from as long as I've been here, which has been the last 10 to 11 years. And
we officially started construction in 1986.
Yes.
I bought my first SN3 in 1984.
Yeah.
And after playing around with a test layout, the next thing you know, the HO was going out the door as fast as it could get it out, and the SN3 was coming in equally as fast.
Well, you picked a very interesting scale in SN3. Not many people venture into that scale. It seems to be very unique to the operations and trains that run in Colorado. What sort of brought your passion, since you're way up here in Ottawa, Canada, to the Rio Grande Western and other affiliated railroads?
Well, if I may quote Bill Peter of PBL Locomotive Works, it's big enough to see, yet it's small enough to operate.
Yeah.
And unlike HO, which runs very well nowadays with the new Blackstone stuff, it's very small.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately ON3, which I played with at one time, is a little bit too big for me. So SN3 sort of hits right where I live. So it's almost comparable to HO standard gauge.
Yes.
But it's slightly smaller.
It's definitely not a scale for the faint at heart, because there's quite a bit of work that has to go involved in almost every aspect of it.
You have to be pretty imaginative, creative, and flexible with this. I've rebuilt most of my engines, and almost all my freight cars are either scratch built or from various plastic, wood, or resin kits.
So over that 29 years, where do you stand today in terms of the rolling stock and locomotives?
Well, right now I'm running 319 serviceable freight cars.
Right.
I have 26 locomotives on the layout.
Yeah.
I have 9 or 10 cabooses lying around, half a dozen, more like a dozen passenger cars, and all kinds of maintenance away equipment.
It's pretty interesting because, you know, we've videoed your railroad and the different activities on it, and it centers in on the area between Ridgeway and Rico, and all the connecting points in terms of that area and how it feeds, I guess, the rest of the world. Can you tell me a little bit about that from a history perspective of what that area is about?
Well, first off, when I went to SN3, when I started into it, I realized I couldn't do everything I wanted to do if I were working in HO.
Yes.
So I finally decided to do the most interesting part of the RGS as I see it, and that's from Ridgeway down to Rico. That runs through the most coarse mountains and neatest bridges and all kinds of mining structures and that. So to me, that's the most interesting part of the RGS.
So your railroad specifically is the Rio Grande Southern, which connects into it's a feeder into the Denver and Rio Grande Western. Is that how it developed?
Yeah, I'm modeling the Rio Grande Southern in the warm weather of 1940.
Okay.
The world is going to war, and I keep saying, well, it's a big lie, but I keep saying that business is picking up. We connect with the D&RG at Ridgeway,
right,
where the Ouray Branch joins Ridgeway from Montrose.
Right.
And Montrose is one of my staging yards. And out of Rico, I run into the staging yard, ignoring the hundreds or so miles of RGS that I can't model, and go directly into Durango, which is the other connection with the D&RG.
So it's a bridging road in many ways.
It's a bridging in effect, but it was built primarily to get the ore out of the San Juan Mountains and up around Telluride and areas like that.
Now everybody has a little bit of freelance passion in order to make the railroad interesting, so I guess when you look at the number of trains that actually ran versus what you like to run, it's quite a difference.
Well, it's not so much the number of trains I want to run.
Yeah.
The problem is, when we brought in the operating system, both myself and Tommy Hood were doing it at about the same time. We're both figuring we're not going to get enough people to run these bloody layouts.
Yeah.
Ha, ha, ha. I get 12 to 14 every operating session, which is more than I can handle. And Tommy's running about 25, 26 people every operating session. So we're under a lot of pressure to run trains and keep people going. So what I do then is I run 2 mainline through freights, which do the general business between the 2 ends of the layouts and all communities in between. But in order to get empty ore cars up to Telluride, I've had to run 2 ore trains. One out of Ridgeway and one out of Rico. So they pick up the empties and bring them up to Telluride, and the Telluride switcher does the switching at Pandora and gives the loads down to the 2 downbound engines, and away they go. I also run 2 full passenger trains. The RGS was running galloping geese at this time in history, and the guys run the galloping geese, and after a while their opinion, well, it's like watching paint dry. So we run full passenger trains, which is not correct, but they're neat.
It's interesting too, because when you think about running an operation, you need a lot more cars than what you see staged at, say, sidings and so on and so forth. You probably need about 3 times the number in order to make it function properly.
Well, for example, the 2 mines, the one at Deep Creek and the one at Ilium. So we have 2 empty gongs at each one. So in order to work them, we have to bring the ore train that works the 2 mines. The ore train out of Ridgeway works the 2. So he's got to bring 4 empties with him. Pick up the 4 loads, leave the empties. And then he takes the loads back to Ridgeway. Well, those loads go to Montrose on the next op session. So for the next op session, he's got to have 2 more sets of empties there. In order to come up and pull out the loads and do it again. So we've got probably 12 to 16 cars tied up in that service alone.
So how did you figure that all out? Because, I mean, originally people just go out and buy a few cars and run them on their trains. So how did all that happen?
There's nothing like an operating program to show you how many cars you're short.
Yes.
When you start, holy cow, I've got nothing here to run. So you learn pretty fast.
So when you acquired Rail Ops and put it into effect, it sort of showed you where your problems were because the computer wasn't generating enough cars.
That's right. There's too many, not enough cars to do the jobs we want to do. I mean, I have 108 3000 series boxcars on the layout, and most of them are in ore service. And believe it or not, we can still run short.
Yes, I can believe that.
I have another 17 or so to build.
So on top of that, you had to do track laying, you had to get the scenery up and going. What I saw of your layout, most of your track, or maybe almost all of it, is hand laid.
All of the track visible on the layout is hand laid. I did use some commercial switches in Telluride, which I'm sorry I did, but it was an awkward place to work, so we did it. But everything else is hand laid. In the staging yards, I used commercial track and that. There was no way I was going to do hand laid in there. And I use a splined road bed for most of the main line, and plywood and HOMASOTE for the yards. So
3 years ago, you're sitting in your railroad room and you had this thought that came over you based on what you've seen in that area and the operations, is a line that runs from Montrose to Ouray. Now you had built the portion of it that went from Montrose into Ridgeway.
That's correct.
And you sort of had a track that was heading off into La La Land that was kind of where you threw cars that were supposed to go up to Ouray.
Well, that's the beginning of the actual Ouray Branch from Ridgeway. It's only about 10 miles long. It's running on 30 and 35 pound rail, and sees a train once every day or 2. I've always liked the branch. I've liked the way it laid out, and it's just going to be in a really tough area that I'm building it. I also want 1 yellow D&RGW water tank. All the RGS tanks are freight car red. I want 1 yellow one. I'm building it right now.
So it's really quite interesting. A yellow water tank stimulated you into this big expansion project, a retrofit project, obviously, because your layout fills your basement pretty much where as it stands right now.
Yeah, this is going to be the most challenging undertaking I've done so far. When when I try to explain how I fitted it, or how it's going to fit,
Yeah.
you will all figure I'm nuts.
Yes.
I'm going where no model railroad's gone before.
At least in that model railroad room.
Yeah. This is the Ouray yard as I'm making it.
Let's have a look at this. So this is where the trains will come in from.
This is the connection to Ridgeway.
To Ridgeway, right.
It'll be done on 3 benches that'll be built outside and then moved inside.
Yeah.
And this here, the Ouray yard itself, is done on 2 benches.
Right.
So once I finish the track work and the scenery, I'll just dismantle it, float it into the basement, and mount it. It sounds easy.
So in the process of basically getting all the track work in, and so what do we have in this town here? We have a 2-stall engine house?
We have a 2-stall engine house. We have a 40-foot gallows type turntable.
Yeah.
2 3-way stub switches, and all the other switches are stub switches.
So the turntable is going to go right in here?
That's right.
Okay, and this is the feeding track to it?
That's the lead to the turntable.
Okay.
This will be an outside storage track.
Yeah.
For cabooses, passenger cars, whatever.
Yeah.
And of course the engine house.
So this must be somewhat based on the original plan or layout that was in that yard, but you had to do a bit of compression?
Well, the original yard is over 2,000 feet long.
Okay.
And I'm down to 18 feet.
Yeah,
so there's a little compression going on.
Yeah,
there.
Of course.
Yeah. But I have tried to lay the tracks out pretty much as they were in this area, because there were only 3 tracks wide.
Right.
Plus these tracks down here. At the far end, I'm going to wing it a bit and do what sort of fits and makes it look good.
Okay, so here's the station. And that looks very much like the one I've seen in the books.
That's the station at Ouray. It's actually a rags to riches kit by Joe Foose.
Yeah.
And the engine house is also one of his kits. Very nice kits. They go together really well. They're well worth your time and effort.
Yeah. So they're a laser cut kit?
They're laser cut wood kits.
Yeah, and what about the windows and doors? Are they a peel and stick type?
Yeah, they're peel and stick.
Wow.
And it hasn't been finished yet. It needs to be weathered and platform not done, but we're getting there.
I like the way they've framed up the platform. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, the platform's quite good.
Yeah.
The platform actually wasn't here in 1940, but I like the platform, and we're putting it in.
Now when I'm looking at your track work here, and I can see as you go into the curve, it's raised up quite a bit from the bench. How did you build the foundation for your track? What's involved with that?
Well, I'm using the old stand-in. I've got HOMASOTE that I've cut a block out to go underneath the depot.
Yeah.
And I cut a bigger block to go underneath the roundhouse, the switches, and the turntable. In between here, I just cut strips and put them in.
Yeah.
But this is something else that a friend of mine made. It's strips of HOMASOTE that have been cut sideways to allow them to bend.
Are they cut right through?
No, they're cut so far in and then staggered.
Oh, okay. So you can just sort of bend it a bit?
You can bend it. You've got to be careful though.
Yeah.
And then to hide the cracks, I just put on a coat of drywall compound.
Yeah.
And just put enough on to fill the holes, to fill the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
Then I glued the ties to the top.
And you did the ties individually?
Yep, individual ties.
Yeah.
And I've got code 55 rail to lay.
Yeah.
And if I'm not crazy enough, I've got code 40 rail I'm going to put in too. I'm actually going to do the engine house and all those tracks in code 40 rail.
Yeah. So it's kind of nice to be sitting out under your covered porch here in the fresh air doing your modeling. It's a little bit better than the basement in the summertime.
First time ever I've built a model railroad out on the back deck, but when you see where it's got to go, there's absolutely no room to work at all.
Yeah.
It'll be an interesting challenge just to float them into place.
Right, so basically this breaks down into manageable sections that will go down the stairs.
Yeah, so we have one section here.
Yeah.
And what I'll do is I'll get the switch machines mounted.
Yes.
There's 3, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
They'll be tortoises.
Yes.
All the track will be in. The basic scenery, which in this case here is going to be finished right up to here.
Right.
And I will fit a couple of buildings here yet. Don't know what they're going to be yet, but they can be done anytime.
So it looks like you forgot to paint the sky on that piece board there. Is there a reason for that?
Scenery's coming right up.
Okay.
Scenery's coming right up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where it's sort of partly painted there, it's going to be full scenery right to the top?
Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do is get the basic layout built and running.
Right.
Get all the wiring done, get all the track work done, get the principal buildings situated, do all the scenery I can out here, and then float it into place.
Geez, you do a really good job on the backdrops there. I really like them. They got a different color tone to them than the other ones.
This guy, you know, that I work with, if you feed him right, he'll change his color ideas. Yeah,
no, it looks kind of interesting. I've never seen that specific technique before.
Well, because it's going in such a dark area, he decided to build the backdrop a little bit lighter. Yeah. And it'll stand out a little better.
Yeah. Now that's not a very big backdrop though. It's only what, 9 inches high?
Yeah, because the end advanced junction yard and ilium come right here.
Wow.
So you've got less than 9 inches between the bottom of the layout above and here.
So there'll be a lot of delayed uncoupling then, I guess, in the foreground where you can reach.
You can reach all this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll all be accessible.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a little bit of a challenge.
So this is really one of those situations where it's an out and back type of thing, a turn, I guess, in the context of how we normally see operations.
Well, there's actually 2 ways I can operate.
Yeah.
And I've chosen to do it the way it was done originally.
Okay.
Originally, the engines and crews were stationed here in Ouray. Yeah. So the engine crew would come out in the morning with their orders, do their switching in the yard, proceed to Ridgeway, switch the Grandview mill on the way, pop into Ridgeway, and if there was cars to drop off, they'd drop off. And then they go down to Montrose, turn around and come back later that day and again work Ridgeway and Grandview mill and come up here and finish the work at night. Yes. And then put the engine away at the end of the day. Right. The other option, of course, is to run out of Montrose and up to here and back, and I like it this way. Yeah. Well, it'll keep you out of that busy area of the layout at the beginning of the op session. Well, if it works right, whoever's operating here will have his work finished. Yeah. And be working his way towards Ridgeway before all the congestion comes up to Ouray Branch Junction and that. Yes. And by the time he gets down to Montrose and lays over for half an hour, 45 minutes, by the time he comes back, it should be fairly calm. Cool. Well, let's go down and have a look at where this is supposed to fit. Okay. As you can see along here where the new paint backdrop is, that's where the new Ouray Branch will travel along to get to Ouray.
you.